My stepmother laughed as I lay gasping on our kitchen floor, telling the paramedics I was just being dramatic for attention. She didn't know I had already hidden a motion-activated camera in my bedroom, and she definitely didn't know a hospital social worker had just uncovered the sick, $48,000 secret she was desperately trying to hide from my father. I was on the linoleum when the paramedics walked in, and Khloe was laughing. It wasn't a nervous chuckle or a shocked gasp. It was a real, performative laugh, the kind she used at networking events, light and airy, aimed directly at the two first responders as if they were an audience she needed to charm. "She does this," Khloe said, waving a manicured hand at me while I lay there suffocating. My breath was coming in fast, ragged, cavernous gasps that didn't feel like enough air, no matter how violently my lungs expanded. She gets dramatic when she wants attention. Honestly, ever since her dad remarried, it's been one tantrum after another. The paramedic closest to me, a sharp-eyed woman with her dark hair pulled into a tight bun and a name tag that read Ramirez, didn't even blink at her. She had two fingers pressed firmly to my wrist, her eyes locked on a portable monitor. I could smell something sickeningly sweet on my own breath, like rotting fruit and nail polish remover. I would later learn this was the smell of ketones aggressively burning through my bloodstream because my body had gone nearly 15 hours without a working dose of insulin. "Ma'am, this isn't dramatic," Ramirez said, her voice dropping an octave into something dangerously professional. "Her glucose is reading HI. That means it's too high for my machine to even register a number. She is in severe diabetic ketoacidosis. That is not attention-seeking. That is the beginning of organ failure. She is a type 1 diabetic, and according to this chart, she's had 2 major episodes this month." The other paramedic, a broad-shouldered man named Henderson, was flipping through a battered red folder my dad kept by the front door for exactly this reason. "3rd episode. Henderson corrected, his voice tight, "if you count the one 3 weeks ago that wasn't officially called in." "She's fine," Khloe insisted, her smile faltering just a fraction. "She's always perfectly fine a few hours later, it's just a performance." I wanted to scream at her, I wanted to tell them everything. But my mouth was a desert, my tongue felt swollen and useless, and every breath came out in that same terrifying, mechanical rhythm. The paramedics were watching my chest heave with narrowed eyes. It was Cusmal breathing the desperate, rapid panting a body does when it's trying to blow off toxic acid it can't purge any other way. Somewhere in the distance, I heard my dad's car pull into the driveway, tires skidding on the gravel, a door slammed. His voice was already shouting my name in a sheer panic before his key even turned in the lock. Ramirez started an IV line for fluids, her eyes darting between my pale face and the monitor. Then, she looked up, staring right past me and directly at Khloe. Her tone shifted into something flat, procedural, and terrifyingly accusatory. It was the voice of a veteran responder who already knew the answer to the question she was about to ask. "Ma'am, let me ask you something," Ramirez said, not breaking eye contact. "Her medical chart says she is supposed to have a full month's supply of insulin in this house. Pharmacy records show a refill was picked up 18 days ago. Where is it?" Khloe's pristine smile didn't move, but a frantic twitch betrayed her eyes. I don't know what you mean." "It should be upstairs." "I mean there is an empty, pried open lockbox in a bedroom upstairs," Henderson interjected. He wasn't asking, he was stating a fact. My dad had dragged him upstairs the second he arrived to show him. "The metal around the lock is scratched to hell, and I have a 17-year-old girl on my stretcher who has been in DKA for hours because she had absolutely nothing to correct her blood sugar with. So, I am going to ask you one more time. Where is the insulin?" That is the exact moment I need you to sit with. Because it's the moment I replay in my head whenever people ask me how I survived the absolute hell that followed. Not the collapse, not the sirens, but that one singular second where 2 complete strangers in uniform looked at my stepmother the way I had been begging my own father to look at her for almost 2 years. Finally, someone else saw the monster behind the makeup. Khloe's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No sound came out. For the very first time since she had infiltrated our lives, she didn't have a scripted excuse ready. I watched it happen from the floor, my vision swimming with black spots, and even as sick as I was, I promised myself, hold on to this. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that you saw her break. But to truly understand how I ended up dying on my own kitchen floor, you have to rewind 2 years. You have to go back to a high school gymnasium in Grand Rapids that smelled intensely of floor wax and sweat, and a 15-year-old girl who had absolutely no idea her own immune system had just declared war on her body. I was 15 when I collapsed during basketball tryouts. It was a freezing Tuesday in November. I remember the specific, burning humiliation of it far more vividly than the fear. I was going up for a routine layup in front of the coach and 15 other girls, and my legs simply ceased to exist. It was as if someone had violently severed a cord in my spine. I remember my face hitting the hardwood, someone's water bottle clattering across the court, Coach Miller shouting my name, and then, nothing. I woke up in a glaringly bright room at St. Jude Medical Center. My dad, Arthur, was gripping my hand so tightly his knuckles were white, his eyes red and swollen. Type 1 diabetes. My pancreas had just quit. Some dormant autoimmune switch had flipped for absolutely no logical reason. There was no family history. There was no warning. My blood sugar had been pushing 600 when the ambulance brought me in. I spent 5 grueling days in the pediatric intensive care unit while a rotating cast of exhausted nurses taught my terrified father and me how to stay alive. We learned how to count carbohydrates down to the gram, how to draw insulin into a syringe without lethal air bubbles, and how to recognize the terrifyingly subtle difference between a normal teenage headache and the onset of a diabetic coma. My dad cried at my bedside on the 3rd night, burying his face in his hands when he thought I was finally asleep. I heard every sob. My mother, Elena, had died 4 years earlier from aggressive breast cancer, the silent kind that hides until it's already metastasized into your bones. Dad had spent those 4 years treating me like I was made of spun glass. Now, here I was, tethered to a machine that beeped every time my heart beat, diagnosed with a chronic, incurable illness. I think something inside him fractured that night. He silently vowed that he would never let anything sneak up on us again. He became obsessive. He learned the disease faster and better than I did. He stashed emergency glucose tablets in his coat pockets, in his truck's glove compartment, and in Ziploc bags hidden in my backpacks. For 6 solid months, he set alarms for 2 a.m. every single night, creeping into my room to prick my finger and check my blood sugar while I slept. He only stopped when my endocrinologist, a brilliant, stern woman named Dr. Gallagher, sat him down and gently told him that his hypervigilance was going to break him. She told him he had to trust me to wake up on my own. Dad backed off, but only slightly. For a year, it was just the two of us. We learned this terrifying new language together. We ate dinner at precisely 6 p.m. every night so my fast-acting insulin doses stayed mathematically predictable. For the first time since my mom passed away, our house felt safe. It felt steady. I remember falling asleep on the living room rug while Dad read his thrillers in his recliner, thinking that we were going to be okay. We had survived the worst. Then, Khloe showed up. She worked in the same corporate complex as Dad, managing a boutique wellness and holistic health consultancy out of a rented suite, with her name elegantly frosted on the glass, Aura Botanicals. It was a company that sold overpriced detox protocols, essential oils, and aggressively marketed dietary supplements to wealthy suburban women. She was 34, impeccably dressed, with shiny auburn hair that always looked professionally blown out, and a laugh that arrived just a fraction of a second too fast like she had rehearsed it in a mirror. Dad met her in the building's lobby in January. By April, they were exclusively dating. By the following February, a mere 13 months after they met, they were married in an absurdly expensive outdoor ceremony near Traverse City. Khloe officially moved into our house that same week, bringing a moving truck full of beige furniture and an attitude that suggested she was the new CEO of our lives. My mother's photographs vanished from the living room mantle within the first 12 days. Khloe didn't throw them away, she was far too calculating for that. She was careful in the specific way manipulative people are when they know they might need a defense later. She simply relocated them to a plastic storage bin in the garage, replacing my mom's smiling face with framed prints of abstract art and cursive inspirational quotes about manifesting positive energy. I told myself I would adjust. I was 16. I was supposed to be resilient. I told myself a lot of lies that year. The first major red flag, the one I didn't recognize as a warning siren until it was too late, happened 6 weeks after the wedding. We drove up to a rented cabin in Traverse City for what Khloe aggressively branded as a family bonding weekend. The cabin was a 4-hour drive from Grand Rapids. I meticulously packed my own medical bag the night before, just as I had done every day since my diagnosis. I packed my glucose tablets, my backup insulin pens, alcohol swabs, my glucometer, and extra test strips into a bright blue, soft-sided cooler bag. I left it sitting squarely on the entryway bench so it was impossible to miss. Khloe insisted on loading Dad's SUV herself the next morning. She practically shoved us into the car, claiming she wanted to take the burden off Dad. Somehow, during her loading process, my bright blue cooler bag never made it out of the house. We didn't discover it was missing until we were 90 minutes out of the city, surrounded by endless stretches of highway and pine trees. I remember the exact, suffocating flavor of panic that coated my throat. I started doing frantic mental math, calculating exactly how many hours I had before my current, half-empty pen ran completely dry. Dad gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles popped. Khloe sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone, and sighed dramatically. "Arthur, relax, we'll just find a pharmacy up there. It's really not a big deal." "Maya, you're being incredibly dramatic." We spent the first 3 hours of our relaxing vacation, desperately hunting down a rural, independent pharmacy 45 minutes away from our cabin that actually carried my specific brand of insulin. Because it was a different pharmacy chain and we were out of our network, the insurance system immediately flagged the transaction as too early for a refill and denied the claim. My dad had to pay $315 in cash for a single pen of insulin that should have been sitting in my bag. Khloe apologized in the vague, weightless way she apologized for everything. I was just rushing, Arthur. I must have grabbed the wrong bag. These things happen. We don't need to let it ruin the weekend. I let it go. I wanted so badly for my dad to be happy, and I didn't want to be the difficult stepdaughter. I didn't understand yet that I had just watched the trailer for a horror movie I was about to star in. What I absolutely did not know and wouldn't uncover until much later was that this cabin trip happened exactly 12 days after Khloe had quietly taken out a high-interest business loan of $48,000 to rebrand and relaunch her failing supplement company. I didn't know she was already missing payments before we had even unpacked her moving boxes. I didn't know about the crushing financial pressure hiding beneath her toxic positivity. At 16, all I knew was that my life-saving medicine had been left behind, and somehow, by the end of the car ride, I was the one being told to apologize for ruining the mood. The real, undeniable pattern started roughly 4 months later, right as the honeymoon phase evaporated. It began so small that I genuinely thought I was losing my mind. I would leave my insulin pens in the designated butter compartment of the fridge where they had lived safely for 2 years, and I would find them relocated to the chaotic hallway medicine cabinet, buried under expired cough syrup and Khloe's vitamin bottles. I was organizing the kitchen, Khloe said dismissively the first time I confronted her. She rolled her eyes like I was a toddler, throwing a tantrum over a toy. It's medicine, Maya. It belongs in the bathroom with the other medicine. I tried to explain, as calmly as my shaking hands would allow, that unpunctured insulin requires refrigeration to stay viable, and more importantly, it needs to be in a consistent location so I can grab it in an emergency. She sighed loudly and told me I was being hyper-controlling for a teenager. A few weeks after that, my emergency backup vials, the ones that cost $480 each even with our insurance coverage turned up, shoved to the very back of the bottom crisper drawer, hidden completely behind a massive Tupperware of rotting lettuce. When I found them, I stood in the kitchen holding the small cardboard boxes that quite literally kept me alive, and I felt a cold, dark dread settle into the pit of my stomach. Then came the dinners. Khloe would sit across from me at the table, watching me test my blood sugar before eating. It's a tiny, discreet ritual. Prick the finger, squeeze a drop of blood onto the strip, wait 5 seconds, calculate the carbs, inject the dose. One evening, she dropped her fork onto her plate with a loud clatter. "That is so disgusting," she sneered, her nose wrinkled in genuine disgust. "Can't you do that in the bathroom? My cousin has diabetes, the type 2 kind, and he just handles it privately like a normal, polite person." I told her, keeping my voice dead level, that timing mattered. If I took my insulin 10 minutes too early in another room, or if I delayed it, the entire calculation would be thrown off, risking a severe spike or a dangerous crash. She offered me that same condescending, plastic smile. "Well, I just think there's a polite way to handle your little issues without making everyone at the dinner table lose their appetite." A week later, the holistic healing lectures began. Looking back, I now realize these conversations weren't about my health at all. Khloe had incredibly aggressive opinions about Big Pharma. She constantly lectured me, claiming that insulin companies wanted me dependent on their chemicals forever to drain my dad's bank account. She insisted that if I just committed to her company's detox protocols, drank her raw juices, and took her $90 a bottle or botanical supplements, my pancreas would wake up and start producing insulin again. I explained to her, with the agonizing patience of a hostage negotiator, that this is not how an autoimmune disease functions. My immune system had permanently destroyed my insulin-producing beta cells. No amount of kale, turmeric, or positive thinking was going to resurrect dead organs. She just patted my arm patronizingly. "You'll understand when you're older, Maya. Doctors just want sick people because sick people are profitable." I didn't understand yet that she desperately needed that narrative to be true for her own financial survival. What I did notice was that Khloe had started taking pictures. It started subtly. I'd walk into the kitchen and catch her snapping a photo of my testing supplies neatly laid out on the counter. Once, I woke up from a nap on the couch and caught her taking a close-up picture of the continuous glucose monitor CGM sensor stuck to the back of my arm. When I demanded to know what she was doing, she barely blinked. "I'm building a holistic wellness vision board for a client," she said smoothly, "just showing examples of medical dependency." I was creeped out, but I filed it away. I wouldn't understand the true, sickening purpose of those photos until the police were involved. 2 weeks after the vision board incident, I found 3 of my brand new insulin pens in the kitchen trash can. Actual garbage. They were covered in wet coffee grounds and eggshells. They were 9 months away from expiring. That was nearly $900 worth of medication, sitting in a hefty bag. When I dragged the trash bag into the living room and confronted her in front of Dad, she gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "Oh my God, Maya, I am so sorry. I was doing a deep clean of the fridge and I must have swept them into the bag by mistake. I was just moving so fast." It was a blatant lie. The pens had been in a designated plastic bin on the top shelf, nowhere near the expired food. But Dad was exhausted. He was working overtime to cover the bills, he wanted peace in his new marriage, and I was exhausted from constantly playing the role of the paranoid stepdaughter. So, I let it go. I didn't believe a word she said, but I backed down. Then came Thanksgiving. We were at Grandma Lillian's house, packed around a massive dining table. Khloe decided to turn a terrifying hypoglycemic episode I'd had a week prior, an episode where I was shaking so violently I couldn't open my locker, sweating through my shirt, vision tunneling to black into a punchline for the whole family. She is just so dramatic about her little diabetes. Khloe laughed, reaching for the cranberry sauce as if she hadn't just humiliated me in front of 12 people. She practically collapsed in the hallway just to get a boy to carry her backpack. My uncle Marcus, who was 3 IPAs deep and hated conflict, chuckled along with her. My grandma Lillian, however, slammed her silverware down. Dad's jaw tightened so hard I thought his teeth would shatter. He looked at Khloe and said, very quietly, "That is not funny, Khloe. Do not joke about that." Khloe's eyes flashed with venom, but she kept her voice sweet. "Arthur, you need to let her learn to laugh at herself. You coddle her. Everyone in this family walks on eggshells around her diagnosis, and honestly, it's creating a very toxic environment for the rest of us." I sat there, staring at a plate of turkey I suddenly couldn't swallow, remembering how my mom used to hold me when I was scared. My mom would have dragged Khloe out of that house by her hair. By January, my blood sugar logs became violently erratic. Massive spikes followed by terrifying crashes. It was the exact kind of chaos that happens when insulin doses are missed or randomly delayed. Dr. Gallagher reviewed my charts during a checkup and looked at me with deep concern. She asked, very carefully, if I was experiencing burnout, if I was skipping doses, or if I was struggling with an eating disorder. I couldn't tell a respected medical professional, "I think my stepmom is hiding my life-saving medication." I sounded insane even thinking it. So, I lied. I said I was just stressed with exams. Dad and I drove home in a heavy, suffocating silence. Around this time, Khloe began a subtle, calculated campaign to isolate me. She would call Grandma Lillian and drop little comments about how exhausting it was to manage a household with a chronically ill, attention-seeking teenager. She told Uncle Marcus that Dad was developing an anxiety disorder because of my constant need for medical drama. She was laying down the tracks for her defense long before the train ever derailed. She also weaponized our finances. Dad kept a spreadsheet of my medical costs: insulin, test strips, the CGM sensors that cost $110 every 2 weeks. Khloe started bringing up those numbers during completely unrelated arguments. "I'm not blaming Maya," she yelled at Dad one night when he said we couldn't afford a trip to Cabo. "I'm just saying we literally never have a dime to ourselves. I am suffocating in this house, Arthur. It's not fair that I have to live like a pauper because your daughter's medical bills drain us dry." Then came the spring, and the pens didn't just relocate, they vanished. 5 pens dropped to 3 over a weekend. 3 dropped to 1 by Wednesday. I was terrified. I started taking time-stamped photos of my insulin supply every single morning before school and every night before bed. It felt deeply paranoid, right up until the morning I woke up and found 2 entire boxes completely empty. I showed Dad the photos. Monday morning, 6 pens. Tuesday morning, 2 pens. He confronted Khloe in the kitchen. She put on an absolute masterclass in manipulation. She acted horrified, genuinely stunned. She cried real tears. And then, she turned it directly onto me. "Arthur, teenagers hide things for attention." She sobbed, clutching his arm. "Especially teens who feel replaced by a new marriage. Have you considered she is throwing them away to make me look crazy? To force you to focus entirely on her again?" I waited for Dad to shut her down. He didn't. He came into my room that night, sat on the edge of my bed, and asked me, his voice cracking with exhaustion, if there was any chance at all, that I was sabotaging my own medicine because I was angry about the marriage. I felt my heart physically break. I looked at the man who used to set 2 a.m. alarms to keep me breathing, and I realized Khloe had won. She had planted the seed of doubt, and it had taken root. I told him no. I told him I would rather die than put myself into DKA intentionally. He nodded, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. That was the night I bought the lockbox. I went to a hardware store 2 towns over so Khloe wouldn't find the receipt. I paid $55 in cash for a heavy-duty steel lockbox. I locked my pens inside it, shoved it into the back of my closet, and memorized the combination. For 3 weeks, I had peace. Actual, blessed peace. My numbers stabilized. Update 1. Then came the library incident. I came home late on a Thursday after an AP chemistry study session. I walked into my room and froze. The lockbox was sitting dead center on my bed. It had been violently forced open. The metal around the combination dial was gouged and deeply scratched, like someone had spent an hour attacking it with a flathead screwdriver before finally using brute force to pop the hinges. It was empty. Even worse, the secret emergency vial I kept hidden in an old butter container in the back of the fridge, a vial I had only told Dad about, was gone too. I had exactly 2 hours before my blood sugar would start climbing into the danger zone. I had zero insulin. Dad was stuck at work, dealing with a server outage that kept him an hour away. I called him, my voice already shaking, the dry mouth setting in. He told me he was leaving immediately, breaking every speed limit on the highway. I didn't make it. The stress accelerated the spike. By the time I hit the 1-hour mark, the nausea hit me like a freight train. By the time I dialed 911, my breathing had shifted into that ragged, uncontrollable Kussmaul pattern. I physically couldn't stand up. I slid down the kitchen cabinets, clutching my phone, my vision blurring into dark tunnels. Khloe came downstairs to see what the noise was. I remember the look on her face when she saw me dying on the floor. It wasn't fear, it was annoyance. That brings us back to the paramedics. Ramirez and Henderson. Ramirez demanding to know where the insulin was. Henderson confronting Khloe about the destroyed lockbox. When Ramirez told Dad that she was legally obligated to report this incident as severe medical neglect, Khloe panicked. She insisted she was riding in the front of the ambulance. She didn't care about me, she just knew how guilty it would look if she stayed home. As the ambulance pulled away, I looked out the back window and saw our house shrinking in the distance. I thought about my mom. I knew, with absolute clarity, that if my mom were alive, she would have destroyed Khloe the second she touched my medicine. I spent 8 hours in the ER, hooked up to an insulin drip, slowly clawing my way back from the edge of a coma. While I was sleeping, Dad called the police. An officer named Officer Jenkins met us back at the house at 4 a.m. He walked through the house, noted the destroyed lockbox, noted there was no forced entry into the home, and asked Khloe if there were any domestic disputes. Of course not, Khloe smiled, playing the exhausted stepmother. Before Officer Jenkins left, he pulled Dad and me aside on the porch. "Look," he said quietly. "I believe you. But right now, it is a teenager's word against an adult's. She claims the girl destroys her own meds for attention. Without hard evidence, I can't arrest her for theft of a controlled substance. You need a camera." I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house, feeling the throbbing bruise in my arm from the IV. I had spent 2 years trying to be reasonable. I had let her gaslight me, humiliate me, and literally drain my life away. I was done. The next day, I took $150 of my secret savings money meant for a car and bought a high-end, motion-activated spy camera. It was tiny, completely black, and linked directly to an app on my phone. I hid it on my bookshelf, perfectly wedged between 2 thick hardcover novels, angled directly at my closet door. I bought a brand new lockbox. I put my fresh prescriptions inside. I locked it, and I waited. I didn't tell Dad. If I was wrong, if I was truly going crazy, I needed to know. But if I was right, I needed bulletproof, undeniable evidence that would shatter her web of lies permanently. It took exactly 4 days. I was sitting in 5th period history class when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A push notification from the camera app, motion detected in bedroom. I asked for a hall pass, locked myself in a bathroom stall, put my headphones in, and opened the live feed. My heart stopped. There she was, Khloe. She walked into my room with absolute, chilling confidence. She walked straight to my closet, pulled the heavy lockbox out, and set it on my bed. Then, she reached into the pocket of her expensive cardigan and pulled out a small leather pouch of lockpicking tools and a heavy screwdriver. She had brought tools. This was premeditated. I watched, holding my breath, as she spent 14 minutes aggressively working the lock. When it finally snapped open, she didn't just take the pens. She took out her phone, arranged the open box and the remaining pens so my prescription label was clearly visible, and snapped 3 high-quality photos. Then, she pocketed 4 pens, closed the box, and casually walked out of the frame. I didn't cry. I felt a wave of cold, absolute fury wash over me. It was the most validating moment of my entire life. When Dad got home from work, I didn't say a word. I walked into the living room, sat next to him on the couch, pulled up the saved video, and handed him my phone. I watched my father's entire world collapse in the span of 3 minutes. He watched it once, then he replayed it. He zoomed in on the tools. He watched her take the photos, the color completely drained from his face, replaced by a dark, terrifying red. The man who had been making excuses for his wife for 2 years finally died, and the father who used to set 2 a.m. alarms came back to life. Khloe, Dad roared. The sheer volume shook the picture frames on the walls. Khloe trotted down the stairs, wearing her signature innocent smile. "Yes, honey, what's wrong?" Dad stood up, turned the phone screen toward her, and hit play. The smile dropped off her face like a lead weight. She physically recoiled. "Arthur, that's not what it looks like. That video is doctored. Maya is trying to frame me. You know teenagers can fake things with AI now. It has a timestamp," Dad said, his voice dropping into a lethal, quiet whisper. "It is my house. It is you. You brought tools into my daughter's room, broke into her medical safe, stole her life support, and took pictures of it like a trophy. She isn't your daughter, Khloe screamed, dropping the facade entirely. She's a spoiled brat who has been trying to ruin my life since the day I moved in. You always pick her. Pack a bag, Dad said. Get out of my house. Now. Khloe's chest heaved. She looked around frantically, realizing her charms were completely useless. She snatched her phone off the counter, hands shaking violently, and dialed her sister, Clara. She turned her back to us, whispering furiously into the receiver. Clara, I need you to come get me. Arthur is losing his mind. She stopped. Her spine went completely rigid. What do you mean the hospital called? Khloe whispered into the phone, the blood leaving her face entirely. Why would St. Jude's be calling you? Dad and I exchanged a look. Neither of us had spoken to the hospital since my discharge. Khloe slowly turned around to face us, looking like she had just seen a ghost. The floor was about to fall out from under all of us, because while I had been catching Khloe on camera, someone else had been quietly dismantling her entire life behind the scenes. Update 2. 2 days after Dad kicked Khloe out of the house and changed the locks, we found ourselves sitting in a sterile, fluorescent-lit office at St. Jude Medical Center. Across the desk sat Sarah Jenkins, a senior hospital social worker, and Detective Miller from the Grand Rapids Police Department. Sarah slid a thick manila folder across the desk. Mr. Vance, Maya, she said gently, I am so sorry to bring you in here, but we have uncovered a massive, systemic pattern of abuse and fraud. It turns out, Sarah had been quietly building a case file on me for 2 months. She had noticed my 4 severe ER admissions for DKA over the past year. She cross-referenced my hospital charts with the state pharmacy registry. The registry proved that my maximum allowable dosage of insulin was being picked up, on the exact day it was eligible, every single month without fail. The signature on the pharmacy pickup logs? Khloe Vance. Because Dad worked long hours, Khloe had volunteered to handle my pharmacy runs. She was picking up the $315 pens, but they were never making it into our house. But Sarah didn't have enough proof to involve the police until she received a frantic email forwarded from the hospital's patient advocacy hotline. The email came from a woman named Melissa, a mother living in Detroit, 3 hours away. Melissa had a 10-year-old son with type 1 diabetes. Because insulin prices are extortionate, Melissa ran a mutual aid Facebook group called Michigan Diabetic Supply Exchange, where desperate parents traded or sold extra supplies at cost to help each other survive. 3 months prior, a new user account under the name Aura Wellness started posting bulk listings of brand new, unopened insulin pens. She was selling them for $95 a box, pure profit for her, but a desperate bargain for uninsured parents. Melissa almost bought 3 boxes, but she was meticulous. She asked the seller to post a photo of the expiration dates and lot numbers on the boxes to ensure they weren't expired. When Melissa saw the lot numbers, she froze. Those specific lot numbers belonged to a batch of insulin that was currently on severe regional backorder. Only a handful of specialty pharmacies in the Grand Rapids area had received that exact shipment. Melissa messaged the seller, asking how she had so much of a backorder drug. The seller replied, "Oh, it's just family surplus. My dramatic stepdaughter switched her insurance and we have all this extra laying around. She doesn't need it." Melissa's gut screamed that something was wrong. She took screenshots of the listing, the photos, and the messages, and sent them directly to St. Jude's hotline, knowing it was the largest pediatric endo clinic in Grand Rapids. Sarah Jenkins intercepted the tip. She matched the lot numbers from the Facebook photos directly to the pharmacy dispensing records under my name. When Sarah slid the printed screenshot of the Facebook post across the desk, I stared at the profile picture. It was Khloe. Standing on a beach in Cabo, smiling brightly, I felt physically sick. She wasn't just hiding my medicine to be cruel, she was dealing my life-saving organs on the internet for cash. Dad put his head between his knees and sobbed. A deep, guttural sound of pure agony. Why? He choked out. I pay for everything. Why did she need the money? The forensic accountant Dad hired for the divorce uncovered the answer a week later. Remember that $48,000 business loan Khloe took out before the Traverse City trip? By the time she married my dad, her holistic wellness company, Aura Botanicals, was completely bankrupt. She was severely delinquent on the loan. A predatory collections agency called Meridian Debt Recovery was threatening to sue her, seize her assets, and garnish her wages. She needed fast, untraceable cash to keep the debt collectors at bay while she tried to manipulate Dad into paying off her company's debts. Selling my stolen insulin on the black market for $95 a pop was pure, unadulterated profit. But the most psychotic part? The photos. The forensic accountant recovered emails between Khloe and a sleazy digital marketing consultant. The consultant told Khloe that Aura Botanicals needed real, dramatic transformation stories to sell her overpriced detox teas. He told her that curing a chronic illness would make her a millionaire. Khloe was building a portfolio. She was taking photos of my medical supplies, my CGM monitor, and my prescriptions, planning to eventually post them on her company website. Her grand master plan was to claim that her stepdaughter had been completely cured of type 1 diabetes using Aura botanical supplements, using the photos of my discarded medical equipment as proof that I no longer needed Big Pharma. She was going to let me go into organ failure, steal my medication to pay off her loan, and then use my medical trauma as a marketing campaign for her pyramid scheme. None of it was personal. I wasn't even a human being to her. I was inventory. I was a prop. The fallout was nuclear. Dad filed for an expedited, fault-based divorce. He froze all joint accounts. He froze all joint accounts. Because Khloe's name was still temporarily on the banking, Dad had to go to the pharmacy and pay $450 in cash for my new supplies, enduring the exact same public humiliation Khloe had subjected me to. He didn't complain once. He just paid it, drove home, and apologized to me again. The criminal justice system moves agonizingly slow, but it does move. Khloe was arrested and charged with felony theft of a controlled substance, wire fraud, and felony endangerment of a minor. Her expensive defense attorney managed to aggressively plea bargain the endangerment charge down to avoid a jury trial, but she still had to plead guilty to the felony theft. 9 months later, we stood in a freezing courtroom for her sentencing. Judge Harper, a no-nonsense woman with cold eyes, asked if the victim wanted to read an impact statement. I stood up. My knees were shaking, but my voice was completely steady. I looked directly at Khloe, who was staring at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. I was 15 when my pancreas died. I told the silent courtroom, I had to learn how to keep myself alive every single day. The woman sitting at that table didn't just steal my medicine. She stole my safety. She looked 2 paramedics in the eye while I was suffocating on the floor, and she laughed. She called my dying body an attention-seeking performance so she could make a quick buck on Facebook. I don't want her apologies. I just want the court to know exactly what kind of monster is sitting in this room. Judge Harper sentenced Khloe to 3 years of heavily supervised probation, 500 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay $8,500 in mandatory criminal restitution to my father for the stolen medication. Furthermore, as a convicted felon with a record of medical theft, she was permanently barred from working in any healthcare, wellness, or caregiving capacity ever again. Aura Botanicals collapsed overnight. The Facebook screenshots leaked into the local Grand Rapids community groups. The suburban moms who used to buy her detox teas completely destroyed her reputation online. She had to declare bankruptcy. Last I heard from her sister Clara, Khloe moved to a tiny apartment in Detroit, working a minimum wage retail job under her maiden name, completely alienated from everyone who ever knew her. As for us, we are healing. Dad sold the massive house we lived in with Khloe. He couldn't stand the memories. We moved into a smaller, cozier house closer to Grandma Lillian. My mom's photos are back on the mantle, front and center. Dad and I had to rebuild our relationship from the studs. He carries a guilt so heavy I don't think he will ever fully put it down. But he listens to me now. He never doubts me. If I tell him I feel sick, he drops everything. My insulin sits openly in the butter compartment of our fridge, completely unlocked, exactly where it belongs. I am a senior now. I made varsity basketball captain. Coach Miller keeps a massive stash of juice boxes in her office for me, and she never makes a big deal out of it. Grandma Lillian comes to every single game, sitting in the front row, glaring at the referees. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that laugh, the sheer, terrifying ease of Khloe's laugh while I was dying on the floor. It taught me the darkest lesson I will ever learn. Sometimes, the monsters aren't hiding under your bed. Sometimes, they are standing in your kitchen, smiling at you, telling everyone else that you're just being dramatic. But I survived her. I caught her. And she will spend the rest of her life knowing that a 16-year-old girl with a hidden camera destroyed her entire world. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out and allows us to bring you even more awesome stories. Thank you so much for watching.